What's going on, you guys? It's your man James, aka JP, back again with the Toy Room, and I thought it would be kind of interesting to take a look at the top 10 games in my collection, and I want to do separate videos breaking it down by each console. So I wanted to start off with my favorite console of all time, the Super Nintendo. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at my top 10 Super Nintendo games in my collection. Now keep in mind, this is just games that are specifically in my collection, so if there are games that you don't see on this list that you feel like should be on this list, some of the more top tier or notable games, just keep in mind that they probably aren't in my collection. And if you do want to see which games I actually do have in my collection, I've done countless videos going over room tours and video game collection tours and all that, so I'll leave a playlist on the end of the screen for you to click on at the end of the video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into my top 10 Super Nintendo games in my collection. Alright you guys, so starting off at number 10, we are going to go with Disney's The Jungle Book. So this is just another one of those pretty decent Disney platformers from the 90s. The only reason that I put this one over the Lion King Super Nintendo version of Lion King that I have in my collection is just because the Genesis version of Lion King is just a little bit better in my opinion. So I went ahead with a curveball and went with The Jungle Book. Now The Jungle Book is a really solid Disney platformer from the 90s, like I said, and yeah, there's not really else much to say about that. So at number 10 we have The Jungle Book. Moving on, at number 9 we have NBA Jam Tournament Edition, and this cartridge has seen better days, but if you guys know me, you guys know I'm a huge basketball fan, so NBA Jam definitely had to make the list some way or the other. I did put it towards the bottom of the list just because NBA Jam, in my opinion, hasn't really aged all that well. It's just not as fun, I guess I would say. It just seems really simple playing it nowadays, and it's just very easy to play, and I can pretty much do the same play every single time. Just take the ball, run it up to the wing, shoot a three, and more than likely make it. So that's the only reason why it goes so low on my list. But I am still a huge NBA Jam fan, and it is tons of fun once you have friends around to play local multiplayer with. So at number 9 we have NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Coming in at number 8 we have Earthworm Jim number 2. So honestly, Earthworm Jim 1 or 2 could be in anybody's top 10. I only have Earthworm Jim 2 in my collection. I believe this copy was actually a thrift store find, which is pretty crazy. I have a video of a crazy Super Nintendo haul I have at the thrift store, so I'll leave that at the end of the video as well. But Earthworm Jim is just such a unique game. It's Earthworm Jim 1 or 2, but we're talking about 2 because that's the one I have in my collection. But it's just such a unique game, so 90s with the artwork, just very unique artwork, animation wise is very unique, and just the whole game really is just a very unique platformer. So at the number 8 spot is Earthworm Jim number 2. Alright, so coming in at number 7, when you combine one of my favorite game genres of all time with one of my favorite TV genres of all time and put that together, you get Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So this is a side-scrolling beat-em-up based on obviously Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which is my favorite Power Rangers series of all time. Yeah, this game is a solid game. It's really not that bad of a licensed game. It's just your straightforward beat 'em up, but you do get Zord fights and all the different power-ups and everything like that, and I believe you fight as the teens in their human modes or regular modes, and then you actually get to morph into their Power Ranger modes, which is really cool and very unique take on the gameplay. So yeah, another solid beat 'em up. So that is the number 7 spot with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Alright, so coming in at number 6 is going to be, can you guys guess what it is by this cartridge? You should. That is Killer Instinct. It got so high on the list for several reasons. One, because just the cartridge alone, I love the all black cartridge. Not many Super Nintendo games came in a different colored cartridge. Only a handful of them did, and I believe Killer Instinct was the only black cartridge, and I believe this was a thrift store find as well. But yeah, Killer Instinct is just such a crazy, unique fighting game with such high combos and the ultra combos and combo breakers, and it was just very over the top, and it's still revered today as just one of the best fighting games of all time. So I definitely had to put it towards the top of my list. It's right there in the middle more or less at number 6, but that is Killer Instinct taking the number 6 spot. So we've entered the top 5, and this was actually really difficult for me because all these games in my top 5 are the games that I grew up playing. When I owned a Super Nintendo, I grew up playing all of these games. I put so much hours into all of these games, and it was really hard for me to rank them because I just love all of these games. But taking the number 5 spot, that is going to be none other than Super Mario Kart. So this was the original Mario Kart, the first Mario Kart that we ever got, and while it hasn't aged incredibly well, it's still really fun to go back and play by yourself or even local multiplayer. But just compared to some of the other Mario Kart games in the franchise, it's really just not as good as those games, and it really just ranks towards the bottom of the list. Probably might be the worst Mario game out of the franchise. Not to say that it's a bad game by any means, but it's just not as good as some of the other ones, so that's why I have to put it at number 5. But regardless, Super Mario Kart still a really fun time just to play by yourself or to play local multiplayer, so that takes the number 5 spot. Right, coming in at number 4 is going to be Aladdin. Such a great platformer. This was the version that I grew up playing. I did not own the Sega Genesis version. While I did own a Sega Genesis, I did not have the Genesis version. I had the Super Nintendo version, but it's still a really good version in my opinion. It really just comes down to personal preference. I feel like the Genesis and Super Nintendo versions are both equally great. I grew up playing this version of the game. I put so many hours into this game. I still hate that lava level. If you guys are a fan of this game or played this game, you know the lava level that I'm talking about. I absolutely hate that level, but it is really satisfying once you actually beat it. So just one of Disney's best licensed games made by Capcom, and that is taking the number 4 spot, and that is Aladdin. Moving on to one of my favorite Mario games of all time, that is going to be in the number 3 spot, Super Mario World. This platformer is just absolutely amazing, and taking a look at the NES versions of Mario to the jump in Super Mario World, just the artwork, the colors, everything is just so much more vibrant and just pops so much more in the Super Nintendo version of Super Mario World, and it is just incredible. It's the first time we get to meet Yoshi, and it is just absolutely not just one of the best Mario games or best platformers on the system, but of all time, one of the best Mario games and best platformers of all time. And I cannot get enough of this game. I've never actually fully beat this game. I've gotten pretty far, but I do get stuck on, I can't remember the guy's name. I actually have a figure of him. I'd have to jump over him to get him, but let me do that. This guy, one of the wizards in like Bowser's Castle, I cannot get past him for the life of me. He is one of the hardest guys to get past, but yeah, he is the sole reason why I've never actually beat the game, and I'll just throw him back there for now. But that is taking the top 3 spot. The number 3 spot is Super Mario World. Alright, so at number 2 is hands down my favorite fighting game of all time. While it's not the best version of this game, I mean, depending who you ask, some people would not consider it the best version of this game, but it is my favorite version, and that is Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting. Is this Hyper Fighting? Oh, actually, this version is not Hyper Fighting. Huh, I thought I had the Hyper Fighting version, but I don't. Okay, so scratch that. This is just Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. The version that I grew up playing was Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting, but either way, it's still a really solid version, and you know, you cannot go wrong with Super Street Fighter 2. As you can see, I have the arcade one up behind me. It's one of my it's my favorite fighting game of all time. Up there with like Tekken might be like number 2, Tekken 3 would be like my second favorite fighting game of all time, but Super Street Fighter 2 just revolutionized the fighting genre, revolutionized arcades, and even the home ports were really solid ports. So I will play this all day long by myself, local multiplayer, whatever it is. Hands down, one of my favorite fighting games, favorite franchises, just whatever you want to call it. Obviously one of my favorite Super Nintendo games of all time, and that is Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo at the number 2 spot. Alright, so we are finally here. We are at number 1, and number 1, honestly, not only is it my favorite Super Nintendo game in my collection, it's probably my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time, and also just one of my favorite games of all time, and that is going to be Donkey Kong Country number 1, the original Donkey Kong Country. I absolutely love this game. I've spent so much time playing this game back in the day, as this was one of the only games that I owned on the Super Nintendo, and then I put so many hours into it on the Super Nintendo Classic when I got that. And it is just, it's one of the best platformers of all time. Now, other people say that Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 are far superior than Donkey Kong Country 1, and they're not wrong, but I just have so much nostalgia for the original Donkey Kong Country because, again, it's the one that I grew up playing. I put the most amount of hours into that, and it's just so classic. And the music, hands down, the soundtrack for this game, one of the best video game soundtracks of all time. It's a soundtrack that occasionally I'll pull it up on YouTube and just listen to it, let it play in the background, whatever. It's just got some of the best music of all time. So taking the number 1 spot is Donkey Kong country number one. You guys, so we made it. Those are the top 10 Super Nintendo games in my collection. So I would love to know what your top 10, whether it's in your collection or just top 10 of all time, what are your top 10 Super Nintendo games? I would love to know down in the comments below. So let's go ahead and debate in the comments below. But that is my top 10 that are in my collection. And honestly, my list probably wouldn't be too different if I was just doing top 10 Super Nintendo games of all time. I feel like the top 5 would probably be the same, and then the other 5 probably would be a little bit different, but it'd be more or less around what I have. So that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with your friends. Be sure to follow me on Instagram. That link's in the description down below. And if you did enjoy this video, do let me know down in the comments, because I do want to do other videos like this, going over Nintendo 64, PS1, PS2, so on and so forth. So if this is something you guys like, this is something that I enjoy, and this is something that I want to do more of. So please let me know your feedback down below. And also check out some of my other videos that are popping up on the screen for you guys to click on. And I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. So as always, guys, stay tuned for more, and I'll see you guys next time.